Ryan, I'm going to come back to yourself for the next one, and this is probably more an operational question, well, operational and strategy, I suppose. But you know, with all the moving parts that goes on in a channel, and certainly somebody as large as Extreme with thousands of partners, you know, you're often dealing with day-to-day fires, and it's very easy to lose sight of, you know, your overall company's goals or strategy. So, you know, how do you deal with that, Ryan? What's your advice for the audience on how to not lose sight of the bigger picture when you're down in the weeds doing the day-to-day?
Yeah, absolutely, Kenneth. I think you've got to bear in mind that it flows quite nicely from that last poll question, maybe, about how often do you change your program. I think we should look at all types of partner program, but certainly MDF programs as, you know, constantly evolving, or they should be constantly evolving. They're living things. You know, to turn around the direction of something as big as a, you know, $3 million MDF program, a bit like a cruise ship, I guess. You can't quickly turn the direction and change it somewhere else, but perhaps you can deploy some speedboats from the back to meet certain changes in strategy or new approaches that are being demanded by the C team, the executive team. So I think one of the things that we found really useful is, obviously we've got a mindset of constant evolution and improvement of the programs and responding to any changes in corporate strategy. And then also, I think, keeping those internal lines of communication open, because I think what can happen is, you know, your C team has that very clear vision of strategy, and, you know, down in the weeds running your MDF program, maybe there's, you know, a lot of potential there for disconnect. I guess that depends how big the organization is and how many layers away you may be from the C team running your program. But one of the things we found really useful is to have those regular check-ins. So bi-weekly, we have check-ins with our CMO, and members of the channel, the distribution, marketing teams all join that call. It's not a long call, just a 30 minutes to check in where we're at with MDF in terms of approvals and progress through the quarter. But it gives us all an opportunity to also just talk about some of those strategic elements in terms of where the spend is going. You know, are we seeing that spend being effective? So I think that's a really important one, as well as those internal communication channels.
Yeah, no, very good, Ryan. Yeah, and you know, it is a challenge, right? There's no doubt, because James mentioned it earlier. You do need to plan for the long term, but you also need to be able to deal with a very, you know, rapidly changing market, a very rapidly changing channel ecosystem that is out there, and things change. So I think, you know, that's a really neat idea about having those 30-minute calls to keep the marketing, you know, to keep that alignment right up to C level, and certainly, you know, something I think more companies could employ as a way to stay in touch with corporate strategy. So, okay, good. Any thoughts, Michelle or James? Any input on that before I move on? We're almost there.
Yeah, I think it's also important to develop and document a go-to-market plan together with the partners that define the goal and action plans that's aligned to this overall strategy. Because so often we fall into the trap that we'll always be, you know, rushing to plan and start planning for the next quarter, you know, and lose sight of what was the initial intent and objectives. So having that plan that you regularly review the outcomes against that plan will definitely help to keep you as well as the partners on track with the overall strategy.
Yeah, no, good advice, because yeah, often companies are inward looking and not outward looking, and they forget about the partner in all of the day-to-day fires you have to deal with. So definitely it's can be a challenge to keep that in top of mind, so for sure. Yeah. Okay, in terms of time, so I want to try and get to some of the audience Q&A, guys, so we'll move on a little bit. Brenda, I think you might have one last poll to run before my last question to the team.
Yes, I do indeed. So the last one is simple enough one. Does your MDF program support a marketplace of activities to partners? And we've had a number of questions in so far. Of course, just a reminder then, if anyone else has a question, do pop it into the question box and we'll get to it shortly. Okay, those results are pretty even. So I'm just going to close that off now and pass it back to you, Kenneth.